Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Caregivers. I'm Caroline, the Executive Director with Solva Senior Living.
Hi, and I'm Rachel, the Program and Partnership Director here at Solva.
Welcome to our podcast series where we sit down with caregivers in the community and discuss their journey, their bumps along the way, lessons learned, and share advice to those who might be going through something similar. Each episode, we invite a local caregiver on to share their experiences and to chat about what they went through.
Hello, today's guest is Leslie. Thanks for joining us, Leslie.
It's great to be here.
Now, Leslie, you and we first met about 2 years ago now. You connected with us to get some assistance with an elder care plan for your parents. Now, at the time, I was very excited because we get about 80% of our calls are emergency, senior living navigation, immediate needs. So it's quite nice to get a call for planning ahead, which is something we definitely advocate for. So Leslie, if we go back 2 years ago, can you give us a bit of information about where you and your family was on your journey?
Yeah, so at that point, my mother's dementia was advancing. My parents were living at home together. And what was going on for me was that I was feeling like a lot of anxiety about the fact that I knew that the situation of them living at home together was not sustainable over the long run. And it was just kind of hard to kind of move forward in another direction to get them in a safe place where they could be living. So my motivation in contacting you was really because I was feeling a need to do something. Needed to do for my own well-being. I needed to do something, and I was trying to figure out what could I do because I wasn't making much progress in convincing Dad that it was time to move on or put any kind of supports in place, really. And so I thought, well, I'm good at planning, so maybe I will help myself if I do some planning. And the other thing that, Rachel, is that everybody I talk to, every friend who's been down this road with their parents before said to me, don't do what we did. Do not wait to the last minute. Don't try to be making those decisions in a crisis. So I really listened to that, and I thought, like, okay, I can try. It seems that things are progressing quite slowly with Mom, and Dad's handling things really well. So how about I try to not do this in a crisis and try to do what I can now to put ourselves in a better position for when the crisis comes, if we still have to do crisis decision making, that we are not starting from scratch.
Okay, so you definitely listened to others' advice. Now, how was it getting your parents on board with planning ahead?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't get them on board in the beginning. I started without them.
Okay.
So I thought there was quite a bit that I could do without my parents being on board, because there was a lot of education I needed to do for myself in terms of understanding how the whole retirement home industry works, how long-term care works, what services are available in the community. And so there was tons that I could do before I really needed to bring them on board. And my father is a very capable, intelligent, resilient person, but I knew that he had enough on his plate. And so that it would be very helpful if I could kind of narrow down the information and kind of spoon feed it to him at the pace and in the way that he was able to take it in. So I was able to do lots before I needed to bring them on board. And then I kind of told him when I was almost finished with all the research to tell him what I had been doing, and to then in his case, I thought that getting it all written down on paper would be helpful because of the way his mind works, and because he had so little time available to him to talk with me or go visit anything because of his caregiving responsibilities, that I thought, okay, the way it works for him, if he can have it written down and then have time to read it several times, take it in, and then we can discuss it. And that, of course, also worked well for my learning style as well, is that in order to for me to be certain that I understood how things worked, and because my brother was also involved, it was useful for me to have it written down in a plan and to be able to confirm with you, Rachel, that I had understood correctly, that I got the terminology right, that the facts were correct, and that the advice that I was then giving to my father was accurate.
Yeah, and I would say, so when we made that plan, so maybe to give a bit of background, we went around to some retirement homes, we looked at the options, and then we created a plan that outlined what the different options were. We looked at budgets, we looked at services offered, we looked at other services that could be brought in. So once we wrote everything down and I handed you that plan, when you guys were going through it, kind of what were your thoughts, and what did you guys think of the plan once it was developed, and how helpful, I guess, was it?
Yeah, I would say the plan was probably most helpful for me and my brother.
Yeah.
Because, I asked you 1,000 questions.
Yeah, I love them all.
and I needed to make sure I had all the details correct in terms of the pricing, the services, the staffing levels, all of that kind of stuff. And so, and I needed to organize it in my own way. So one of the things that you probably don't know is that I took the report and I rewrote it again afterwards.
Okay.
Kind of put it in my own way, in a way that I thought that Dad could digest it better. So I guess your question was, what was the most useful part of that? Well, I think really understanding what is the difference between long-term care and retirement homes, what retirement homes do and not do. What does memory care mean? What does assisted living mean? What are the typical kinds of services that are available? What are the different ways that retirement homes kind of package those services so that you can compare apples and apples? That's really challenging, right?
Exactly.
When you go visit all these places, in many ways they're similar, but in other ways they're different. And then you go like, okay, is that included? Not included? Does that pricing sound right? Is it the same? So that was really important to be, and then to be able to discuss it with you and say like, it really is apples and apples, because they just slice and dice it a different way, but it all comes out in the end. And your choice comes down to, do you like all inclusive or do you like a la carte,
Yeah.
And that was really helpful to me to feel confidence around the financial part of it in particular.
Yeah, and so why don't I know kind of where you guys are at today. Why don't you kind of share where you guys, what's unfolded over the last year and a half, I guess.
Yeah, so we kind of got to the point where by the time we'd finished the report, that we were ready to kind of take Dad on tours of the 2 or 3 that we had narrowed it down to. And so we did. We took him to the places, but I could tell, that it really is a change management journey, and that he needed time to take in all this new information and these new concepts, and to think about what he was ready to do and what he wasn't ready to do. So there was a long period, I'd say, where we went a couple of times actually to the retirement homes that we'd narrowed it down to. And you could see that he was able to take in certain information, certain layers of information, kind of went in waves. And then and then as my mother's condition started to progress, then you'd see like, okay, then there was more openness for him to be thinking about it in concrete terms as opposed to abstract terms. Because for a long time, I think it was a very abstract concept for him. Like, yes, one day maybe we'll do that, and yes, it's a good idea to plan ahead, and yeah, I'm taking it all in. But it was only when he got to the point where he started to be thinking like, well, maybe we should do this soon, that you could see that he was able to pay attention to some of the more practical issues and started having questions of his own and, seeking information. Before that, he was pretty well kind of like sitting there listening to us, kind of taking it in conceptually.
Yeah.
And so what happened, I guess, was that we got to the point just before the pandemic hit where we kind of finished that phase where he'd read the report, he'd visited the ones we'd selected, and then everything kind of went on hold, right, with the pandemic.
Yep.
And we all kind of hunkered down and tried to do what we could do to support each other during that period. And then in the summer, when things loosened up a little bit, I kind of went like, I think this is going to go on longer than I think. I think just simply waiting it out, the pandemic, is not a good idea because they probably need to move soon. And so we kind of kicked into gear again in the summer of whatever year that was, 2020.
Yeah.
Summer, fall. And then I realized that, other people were doing the same thing. And so retirement homes were quite solicited at that point. And that started to get Dad's attention. He started to go like, oh, so maybe when I'm ready, they might not be ready. And, oh, this pandemic thing is bad. Maybe we should find a port in the storm, is how he put it. So he was more ready to look at it in a concrete terms at this point. And I started to have a few second thoughts about and reservations about the options that we had chosen, and wishing that I had cast my net a bit further. So I got recommendations for 2 additional places from people that I met along the way, through caregiving groups that I was part of. And so I went and checked out 2 more retirement homes. And Dad came too. He put money down on one of them. And then we had an aha. And that aha was that what he wanted was not easy to find. So what he wanted was to be able to move into independent living with my mother and continue to be her caregiver, but with more support. And it started to sound like some of the retirement homes were not going to let us do that, because they were saying that they felt that Mom's dementia was too far advanced for her to live in independent living. And that was a little bit of a panic for us, because we were not comfortable with putting her directly into memory care. And so the two new places we looked at were kind of saying that. And then it turned out that our first choice, which was the first place that you took me to, and was in the report, they had an opening in the fall, and in independent living, and they said, yes, you can have what you want. You can go into independent living together, and yes, your mother can go to our memory care floor in the afternoons every day and participate in the special memory care recreation program that we have. And that was exactly what we wanted, because we wanted Dad to have a significant amount of respite every day. And so we said yes. Dad said yes. And then it was, so they were supposed to move in December. It felt very rushed to him. He started to get quite stressed. Luckily, the people who had the apartment weren't quite ready to move out. So it got delayed till January. Then we got locked down, and we all got cold feet. Okay, so we all got cold feet about the pandemic. And so the retirement home let us delay for another month. So Originally, we were supposed to go in December. We were delayed because of the retirement home, then in January because of the lockdown. And so we started paying for in the month of February of 2021. But Dad still wasn't ready to go, and I wasn't ready to let him go either, because the COVID situation was heating up, and we were just worried about too much about COVID risk and what it would mean in terms of uh, losing our ability to the family's ability to support. So we delayed for another month, and then vaccines appeared. And so they both, because they were paid up members of this community, they got vaccinated first before they even moved in. And they moved in on the 5th of March of this year.
Okay, so they're living now at the residence. I'm gonna bring it back. So you talked a lot about last year and how COVID had really affected things. Now I'm gonna throw this question at you. Do you think, because you had a plan and you guys kind of had an idea where you were going, having COVID thrown at you, you were able to, like, did it feel better knowing that you had a plan, or do you kind of wish that, do you think it would have been easier if there wasn't a plan and COVID wasn't kind of all involved? I guess I'm trying to ask, was it nice having a plan and having the uncertainty of COVID, or do you kind of wish that things unfolded maybe a bit more reactive?
Oh God, no. No, the plan was absolutely pivotal.
Yeah.
So, so we went into COVID with certain things settled in our mind, and it was a lot of work. Like I spent a lot of time with and without you, gathering all that information, and making decisions with my brother and my father. So I don't think I would have been able to do that during COVID. It just would have been much more complicated, and I'm not sure we would have all had the emotional space to do it. So to have like gone on this 2-year journey and then ultimately conclude that the plan that we made was a good one all along, we kind of meandered off onto a couple other paths, but then came back to the plan. And that meant that I was more confident that the plan was a solid plan and that the choices that we made were right for our family. And that was really reassuring. And so we knew who to call. We had the relationships with the retirement homes. We knew how much everything cost. We had all of that legwork done. And so when this opportunity came up, the only thing to do was to think about, are we ready now? Or are we not ready now? And then how do we introduce this concept to Mom? How do we prepare all the practical things that need to be prepared for the move, which were enormous and exhausted me. So if I'd had to also be making decisions and with imperfect information on top of that, it would have been impossible, I think.
Yeah. And that makes me, it's one thing to come up with this plan and work with someone about, like, on a plan and really talk about options, but then to hear how helpful it was, it feels so good. I'm so happy I was able to help with that plan and able to get all that information for you. Now, I know also through your journey, you were connected with some other resources that were pretty helpful. Do you want to kind of share some of those places that you found support or more information from?
Yes, I mean, so my mother's health condition is dementia. So the Dementia Society of Ottawa and Renfrew was immeasurably helpful. I started with them probably even before I started with you, and all along the same time. So, they have education workshops that helped us understand the progression of the disease, but also about different services that were available, and webinars on long-term care, et cetera. So that was really, really helpful. And the peer support networks that they have put me in touch with have been fantastic. So for example, I met a woman in that peer support group whose mother happened to move to the same retirement home where we were thinking my parents would go. So it was fantastic to have someone who was, a few months ahead of us, who had
Yep.
who had also made that decision after a serious search, and then could tell me she was happy with her decision, that she could tell me what it was like on the inside, and that it wasn't just all a sales pitch, it was actually a reality, right? So that is an amazing resource. Any of these peer support groups is fantastic. I'm trying to think who else I reached out to. In some cases it was a lot of personal networking. So, I did volunteer work last summer at the Ottawa Food Bank Farm, and I just happened to meet a woman who was a dementia consultant and had been the trainer at a retirement home in Stittsville. And so, it's because of that. And she said, I think they have a really good dementia care there, that I went out to Stittsville to look at that home, even though it was nowhere in our search list because of its geographic location. And, we found the sitter companion that we had to help us during COVID when my parents were at home. We found her through, family networking. A friend of the mother of my sister-in-law came up with that contact, So sometimes that was really helpful. And then there was a few times we also used when it was time to get ready for the move. I consulted with a senior, a moving consulting firm that specializes in seniors. They're called Senior Moves. And
Mm-hmm.
I happened to have a former neighbor who worked for them. So I reached out to her, and she was tremendously helpful in helping me think through all of the practical things that we had to do for the move, providing resources in terms of moving companies and how to get rid of stuff. Very kind and generous with, she even offered to come and help sit with my mother when we had caregiving gaps and stuff like that. So that was fantastic. And then, there was two moments recently where I actually reached back out to Salva, to you guys, because I hadn't really talked to Salva, to you guys since that report, which was more than a year ago. But then as we got to this stage, I was missing some ideas and resources, and so I thought, well, why not? So I called Salva while you were on mat leave, and because I was trying to figure out how to, I'm sure I talked to Caroline about many things, but the one thing I know that was really on my mind at that time was, what do people do about looking after their house if you're not ready to sell it the day you move into the retirement home? And she had some ideas of how I cope with that. And then recently I've been struggling with trying to figure out how to cope with some of the visitor policies that retirement homes are putting in place to cope with COVID. So I was hitting some roadblocks in terms of getting respite in place for my father. So I thought, well, why not reach out to Salva and just brainstorm. And partially because I know you talk to lots of families who are in similar situations. So, you may have run across a family who's come up with a solution that I haven't thought of. And so that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing we've been doing is we've been trying to follow all the rules around COVID, because honestly, there's a new rule every week, I think, around retirement homes and COVID and hospitals. So yeah, we definitely try and keep on top of that as well. So it sounds like you reached out to a lot of resources. Now, I know for a lot of people, just reaching out to resources is a barrier in itself. Do you have any advice for people on how to access resources, and maybe even specifically in Ottawa, and kind of techniques?
Well, yeah, I guess I didn't go too wide. Partly what I did is I asked friends. So I found Salva because a friend who'd been down this road before said, well, here's a resource that we use that we found helpful for these reasons. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhat different reasons than I found it useful. But so I thought, okay, well, that's a person I So I took that advice. And I had, and and then the Dementia Society was like a portal into resources, right?
Yeah.
So getting a coach through the Dementia Society was tremendously useful. Joining their support groups, going to their webinars, which they kind of figured out things I needed to know before I knew I needed to know that. So those would be things I would really recommend. Initially, before I kind of interacted with you, Rachel, I was trying to do stuff on my own, and I found it overwhelming. Like it seems like there's 1,000 retirement homes. I didn't really understand the difference between retirement homes and long-term care. I didn't really, there's a million private companies that offer home care. There's all kinds of options for meal plans that people suggested. So I was kind of like overwhelmed with all the information. So I kind of needed it to be curated for me a bit.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, I really appreciated what you did, which is to, you listened to me about, what my family needed and what our wishes and desires were. And then you said, well, how about we start with these 3? And I was like, great, I can't handle more than 3.
Yeah.
So, and I just, part of me was like, okay, I just have to trust that these are the 3 we should start with, right? And hence my, going off and freelancing last summer on my own to look at 2 more, because I just needed to confirm that I didn't look too narrowly, right? And I had the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually helpful. And I, in terms of reaching out for support, I had some not so great experience at the beginning with agencies. So I referral to an agency from a friend, again, someone who had used this agency for her mother and was very satisfied with the support her mother had received. Different needs, but still. And I danced around with that agency for a year, I think, and never got the right person to come in and help out my mom. And I mean, some of that had to do with us and our, we weren't quite ready, I think, to engage with the agency and and take a consistent service and on a specific days and stuff like that. But that was frustrating, because I felt like, okay, I'm asking for help and I'm not getting it. So what's going wrong here? And then the other thing that I did was that I thought, like, okay, what exactly am I needing? And I realized that maybe what I needed wasn't as complicated as it might have sounded. Like, we didn't really need nursing care. We just needed a friendly, reliable person.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to say, okay, well, let me write down, who would be the ideal person to fulfill this home care role. And it really, it's not someone who knows how to, help someone have a shower, who has special training in personal care of people with dementia. It's really, the ideal person would be someone who's chatty and friendly and likes to play games and likes animals and stuff like that, So that was kind of and I thought, wow, there could be lots of people like that out there that don't have PSW training. So what if I try to network more widely? And so I wrote up something and I kind of sent it to all my friends and said, do you know anybody, retired lady who's looking for a part-time job? And it didn't actually work. I didn't actually find someone, but we found someone through my mother-in-law's, my brother's mother-in-law. But I still think it's a good idea, to be thinking more broad, non-traditional ways of finding the help that you want.
Yeah, I really like the idea of asking friends and family, because I mean, you get the honest opinion, right? You get that honest, did it work out or not? I also really like that idea that you wrote down kind of what the ideal person would be to come and help your mom, because I think a lot of people, they go and they're looking for care, and yes, they call a company, and they do trial and error with different caregivers and
Yeah, and
different services.
what really helped was actually, I said that that first agency was a bust, but it was going through that process that helped me figure it out. Because like one of the first referral was a great fit, and then I dawdled, and then she wasn't available anymore. And then the second referral, I met with this woman. I'm going like, you are manifestly a terrible fit, and why is that? Like so I had to think about, why is that? Okay, well, she's an expert in physical nursing. She has zero interest and aptitude for chit-chatting with someone who likes to tell long rambly stories. So I was like, okay, not a good fit. Okay, so what is it I need? And then I think like, oh, well, someone who was a kindergarten teacher in their past life would probably be a better fit than this nurse, right?
Yeah.
So that was really interesting to think of, and to think, there's lots of I think there are um, people who are interested in part-time jobs who maybe have never considered doing home care, who you don't, the thing that you need, they don't need to be certified or licensed to do whatever the thing it is you need. And you might just find someone who think this would be a fantastic way of spending their time and making a little bit of extra money.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Leslie, going back to these resources and like the Dementia Society and the peer support, realistically, how much of a time commitment or how much time have you spent in your days being a caregiver over the last couple of years?
Well, I would say there's two aspects of it. One aspect I would say would be this planning and preparation part, which I would say is almost like project management.
Yeah.
And then the other part is, time actually spent with my mother or my father, caregiving. And I would say I have spent a lot of time doing both. And the more demanding part of it was probably the project management part of it, And I did, I was getting close to retirement, and I made some choices in the last few years of my employment to work part-time so that I would have time to do this.
Yeah. So you would kind of consider the amount of time was probably about a part-time job.
Yeah. So I guess the first year that I would say it's been a fairly intensive activity for the last 3 years. And I would say the first year I probably did 1 day a week. The second year I probably did 2 days a week worth of work. And then this last year, partially because of COVID and partially because like we were ready to move into action, it's been probably more like a 3-day a week job.
And going forward, now that your parents are moved in, what do you kind of see as might be your time commitments for helping them out?
It's a little too soon to say because we're not quite finished the move in.
Yeah.
So COVID has presented some challenges. So my mother has not been able to go to spend time on the memory care floor as planned because of COVID. And so I'm still trying to put a respite plan in place for Dad that works in this lockdown period. I am a caregiver because of COVID, so that means I'm the only respite that he gets. So I go every Saturday, and then there's still for like visit to the doctor, getting well. We haven't been able to manage to do that again because of COVID and dementia. So I would say it's still feeling pretty intense, but I can imagine there will come a time, and I'm hope whenever life within a retirement home can return to normal, that I would be able to go back to having a normal relationship with my parents, which is where I would visit them when I feel like it, and spend as much time with them as I want to, and only need to probably support dad with practical things, once a week or something like that.
Yeah. Here's hoping that maybe by summertime we'll be back to normal in retirement homes.
Yeah, because right now, I have to remember to schedule my visits a day in advance. I have to remember to schedule my weekly COVID test. I have to show up for my weekly COVID test and send it to the retirement home. I have to get dad to send me a grocery list. I have to order the groceries and deliver them to him. So all of that stuff, that's a regular weekly routine now that probably, will drop off at some point.
Yeah. And I mean, good on you, and a huge applause to all those caregivers that have been continuing behind the scenes during COVID, trying to do all the caregiving tasks, and then also trying to, it's become a time when we're trying to protect the seniors, so they're not going out as much, so caregivers are taking on that task. And kudos to you and all the work you put in. I'm sure they really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'd say on the upside, I would say it's not all work. So, one of the blessings of COVID has been, there's nothing else going on. Yeah. So I have, when they were at home, I would be able to spend, 2 or 3 hours with mom playing a game or doing a puzzle or having a chat in a very relaxed way, which was very nice. We've gone on tons and tons of country drives and picnics and stuff like that. Even during the time when we were gearing up for the move, and there were so many logistical details that dad and I had to deal with, like the phone company, the internet, the insurance company, you name it. Well, so I would take him out and we would try to find a place to sit that was COVID friendly and, talk. And so we got to spend quality time together. It was very nice, And I'm actually kind of missing that now because it's a bit, with all the time restrictions and comings and goings in the retirement home, I don't actually have the same kind of relaxed visits with them that we actually used to have.
Yeah. Hopefully soon that will change and you can go for longer. Now, I'm going to finish off with one final question. If you were to go back and do this all over again, is there anything you would have done differently?
No, I don't think so.
No? So you're pretty happy with the plan and how it was executed?
No, extremely happy. If anything, I maybe would have started sooner.
Yeah.
So it might have been more peace of mind for me if because I was feeling that sense of lack of control.
Yeah.
So once I started kicking into action and going on the tours with you and getting things figured out, that was a source of anxiety gone down, because I thought, okay, I'm doing something positive to move things ahead. And if there's a crisis tomorrow and someone falls or someone dies, we're 10% closer to a solution than we were the day before,
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of peace of mind once we got to the final conclusion, like, okay, this is what's going to happen. If dad dies tonight, this is who we call, this is what we're going to do, and for me and my brother, that gave us a lot of peace of mind.
Well, that's great. And Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate being part of you and your family's journey. And I'm so happy that things are starting to work out. There's still little hiccups to deal with, but it sounds like things are going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I've talked mostly about myself, but I would say for my parents, like my father had a lot of anxiety about this move, but it's actually gone extremely well, and extremely well for my mother. She is very happy there, and we did not anticipate that. We anticipated lots of resistance from her, lots of unhappiness about many changes, and it really did not materialize. She is very positive about her new living circumstances, and I think that that's really validating that we made the right decision for her and that it was the right timing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good to hear. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Conversations with Caregivers. If you want to hear more, check us out online at www.solverseniorliving.ca. And don't forget to subscribe to receive notifications about new episodes. Bye for now.